I'm Nedra Knurk. I'm president of Futura RGV, and I want to welcome our candidates, our moderator, Jim Darling, and all of you people out there who are watching this forum on Facebook to learn more about the Republican candidates for U.S. Congressional District 28. Now, Futura RGV hosts these forums as part of our mission to provide information to our community regarding events and elections and issues of importance to you, our neighbors. And certainly good government and the candidates who want to be our leaders are very important to all of us. So this forum is being broadcast on Facebook, and it'll be available to all voters anytime, anywhere you are, if you have an internet connection, until Election Day on March 1. So we do want to thank our board members and our advisors and our sponsors for helping us bring all of these forums to you. And here are the sponsors that we want to thank: AT&T, Sam Garcia Architect, Rhodes Enterprise, Clark Chevrolet, Valley Land Title, Frost Bank, IBC Bank, DHR Health, Rio Bank, L&F Distributors, Ernie William, and our in-kind sponsors, Copy Zone, Upper Valley Mail Service, and CSL Productions, and Milo Rodriguez, who is our tech guy back there, making sure that we get all of this, is the head of CSL Productions. We also want to give special thanks to our partners in AIM Media. AIM Media owns the Monitor and the Brownsville Herald, who have been very kind to lend us their technical expertise and their facilities for several of these different forums. So we also want to introduce Edward Yao, who is also a partner with us. And Edward is with League of Women Voters, RGV. And if you really want to get some good information, Edward is going to tell you how to do it. Edward.
Thank you, Nedra. So my name is Edward Yao, and I am the co-president of League of Women Voters, Rio Grande Valley. I'm here to tell you about our partnership with vote401.org, a nonpartisan voters guide for citizens to become educated on voting information and candidates that will be voting on. All candidates will be sent a survey for them to fill themselves, and for it to conclusively be displayed to all voters who query it via their geolocation. So again, it's vote411.org. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Edward. So get the information and then be an informed voter and then vote. So at this point, Jim Darling, our moderator, I think it's time to turn it over to you, and let's see what our candidates have to tell you about how they will lead if elected to serve.
Thank you, Nedra, and welcome. We have actually 7 Republican candidates for District 28, and we have 2 of them present today. We made an offer to all 7, and we've had 2 that are accepting and going to be here. So welcome, ladies. We appreciate your attendance, and I think the voters will too. As you know, this is a forum. It's not a formal debate, but a forum. And so we're going to ask you a series of questions and give each party a chance to answer them. We'll switch off on who gets to go first on each question, as long as I can keep track of it on my piece of paper here. We did have an opening statement. You have 1 minute, by the way, to answer each question. I think you have 1.5 minutes to answer the first one. And if with your permission, we'll start right now. So the first question we have is, besides the people in District 28, what do you see as our single biggest asset and our single greatest concern? And how would you address this concern? And so Cassie, since you're first up on my sheet of paper here, we'll let you go first.
All right. Well, it's great to be with you this evening, and thank you, RGV Futuro, for hosting this forum. I am Cassie Garcia, and I'm running as a Republican candidate for District 28. So answering your question, so what is the single biggest asset? The American dream is what makes our country exceptional. It is a unique promise that if you work hard and play by the rules, you will thrive and achieve your dream. In District 28, the single biggest asset we have are actually many things. So we talk about the trade industry, the agricultural and ranch community. We have the oil and gas industry, and members of our law enforcement, teachers, and our healthcare professionals that, who were our heroes and continue to be our heroes during the COVID-19 pandemic. The District 28 is a vibrant community, which extends from now Starr County through Zapata, Laredo, all the way up to San Antonio. And to answer this long question here, the World Trade Bridge would be the #1 land in port of entry and the nationwide leader in truck arrivals. And so that is one of our biggest assets in District 28, along with everything else I mentioned, which processes over 11,000 trucks a day and collecting over 5.2 million in fees, and also creating billions of dollars of trade between the US-Mexico border.
Thank you. Thank you. And Sandra, you want me to repeat the question or you want to go ahead with the answer?
I just want to make sure that we were also doing in our greatest concern. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead then. So Cassie is absolutely right. I'm going to have to agree. Our #1 trade port in the United States is the World Trade Bridge. And it's important that we actually know that we're actually doing over 17,000 trucks a day and close to $300 billion in trade annually. We do 40% of the trade for Texas and about 70% for the United States of America. So our trade partner with Mexico is absolutely fundamentally our best asset. That is the single most best asset. As far as our greatest concerns, it's going to have to be the crisis that's happening on the border. But we can't just use blanket statements like we need more manpower, we need more boots on the ground and technology. We have to know what the actual issues are. And we have to realize that when we're talking about what's happening on the border, it's not just affecting Border Patrol agents, it's affecting every single day family lives. It's affecting our communities, it's affecting the crime, not just on the border, but all the way throughout the United States, and especially here in Texas. And I'm honored to say that I have a lot of sheriff supports around the state because they see what we've been fighting. I've been called in as a witness to multiple situations for this. And it's important that we're not just focusing on just the local crime that this is happening, but also what's happening throughout the state and how we can prevent it at the local level.
Okay, obviously you two have been talking to Mayor Pete Sines because he rubs it into me every time as Mayor of McAllen when it was. Okay, so the first question is, so Sandra's up first on this one. What do you believe are the 3 biggest issues facing our country today, and why did you select these?
Ooh, 3 issues for 1 minute. So the biggest, I think the 3 main issues, if we're talking that is of respect to Congress, it would definitely have to be the war on human trafficking and the sex, rape, slave trade is what we call it, which is human trafficking. That doesn't just affect people on one side of the border, that affects people globally, and we live in the triangle for that. And sadly, our here in Laredo, for example, we had over a 900% increase in violent offenders. So that's something that we have to be active in. We can't just pay attention to the numbers that make us feel good. The second one I would have to say is this budget. It's getting completely out of control. Congress has got to rein itself in, pay attention to what is actually constitutional and not what we want to be mandated or what policies or fake or groups that have been brought in. So we got to start sending things back down to the states where it belongs. And then the third one I would have to say is the social issues. We got to get them out of Washington, D.C. and get them back to the kitchen tables where they belong. It's not Congress's job to regulate what's happening in people's living rooms.
Okay, Cassie, same question?
Okay. All right. So for the top 3 issues, #1, I focus on border security. The Biden administration has no solution or strategy to secure the southern border. Every state is now a border state. We have more drugs, human smuggling, bailouts, and over 1,000 apprehensions per day. Families in District 28, and the lack of border enforcement under this administration has cost taxpayers thousands of dollars. And this is unsustainable. I'm also proud to say that I have the endorsement of the National Border Patrol Council in this race. The second issue would be education. School choice is a civil rights issue of the 21st century, and all students in District 28 deserve the opportunity to excel. As your next Congresswoman, I want to implement policies that allow states to lead in the development of reforms that expand, educational opportunities. Where you live should not dictate the education your child receives. That's why we need to allow families to enroll their children in public school of their choice, and the dollar should follow the student. And third issue is inflation. Inflation is another tax on the middle class, and Joe Biden and the Democrats are crushing working class citizens. In the wake of the economic devastation brought by COVID-19, Millions of hardworking American families, small business of District 28 are continue to struggle. And now with inflation, this is a reminder that it is a cruel tax on most vulnerable. With inflation at 39-year high, we're seeing the cost of gas has risen 58%. Bacon is up by 21%, bread and milk by 4%. This is hurting families throughout District 28 and all across America.
Well, thank you. And we're going to talk about border issues, immigration reform, as obviously those are important topics, but immigration reform is the next one. And so let's see, Cassie's up on this one. We're always hearing about businesses or particular industries that can't find people to fill jobs, especially during this pandemic. The first question is, would you support passing immigration reform that can, at a minimum, allow the issuance of work visas or seasonal workers for workers when there is a shortage in the US?
So, you know, this is a big topic talking about the agriculture community. So for like businesses in Texas and across the country to continue to grow and prosper and create more jobs here at home, they must have the resources necessary to remain competitive in an increasingly global economy. So well-educated, highly skilled workers are key to our country's competitiveness. Our outdated system has limited the ability of many Americans to recruit and retain top quality talent. So we must address the H-1B visa crisis to ensure that America remains a world leader in innovation, and that also pertains to those in District 28. Congress, must pass critical visa legislation for our small and seasonal businesses, as well as for companies that fuel economic growth for all Americans. So the unreasonable low caps on H-1B and H-2B visas have made it difficult, if not impossible, for business to augment their U.S. workforce with foreign labor.
Okay, same question, Sandra?
So I'm going to have to kind of almost disagree a little bit. I think that some of what we're facing is that we're overextending ourselves by asking for all of these new workers to come in when we do have a jobs issue right here in the United States of America. We need to actually get these companies to hold themselves accountable. One of the things that they do by bringing in these other workers is they're paying them at lower wages, or they're using illegals to fund this. So they'll have 4 or 5 that are the right visa holders, but then they'll have 20 that are not, so they can exploit that situation. So I think that we do need to have more Americans in these jobs. It's not jobs that Americans don't want, it's jobs that we've essentially kind of made impossible for them to get by allowing these other visa holders to be able to get these jobs. Farming is part of the American pastime, and that's kind of where this specifically goes. And we are very competitive here in the United States. We have some of the best and well-educated people in the world. So to assume that we have to go outside of our own country in order to keep that right, keep America being a global competitor, I think that that's insulting to the American people.
Okay, and so the next question, and you don't have to always agree, that's not a debate, that's certainly appropriate. The next question is, and this goes Sandra first, would you support passing legislation to give dreamers who are already in our country and have been here for many years to a path to citizenship? And if so, what limitations would you put on it?
I don't have a problem with path to citizenship. In our district especially, we have a lot of kids who've come here who may have either, come here under false pretenses or things along those lines. I think as long as they are willing to play by the rules, if they've got clean records and things along those lines, I'm not looking at a Dreamers Act. I'm looking at, you're going to end up having to pay fines, and you're going to have to end up working and kind of outshining yourself a little bit. When we used to do a vetting process back in the day, if you will, we made sure that these people could contribute to our society in positive ways, that they wanted to be active members of our community. And by doing so, we make sure that they're going to be able to help everyone procure the American dream. It's something that I've talked extensively about. It's something that's not new to the United States. We just need to implement these styles of vetting and go back to a vetting process instead of the open borders process that we have currently.
Okay, Cassie?
So I do support a pathway to citizenship for Dreamers or DACA, who came at no fault of their own. People deserve certainty and the ability to plan their lives, yet we know Congress is taking more than 20 years to address this ongoing issue with permanent legislative solution for Dreamers and those with TPS, which is temporary protective status. So we know we need a law that provides such certainty, including permanent status for Dreamers and TPS recipients, many of whom lived in the US and District 28 for over 2 decades and have been contributors to our communities and our nation's fabric. So great things are possible when immigrants and non-immigrants have the freedom and the opportunity to work together to build our nation, expand prosperity for all. That's why we need to modernize our outdated, ineffective immigration system. A clear legal immigration process will make it easier for them and their children to join our communities, to find jobs, enroll in our schools, and fully embrace the American dream.
Okay, and that's going to take bipartisanship, I think. We all know that Congress has become much more partisan in recent years, so much so that the general public has lost confidence in Congress getting much done. The question is, will you, and if you will, how you work with both sides of the aisle if elected to Congress? And that's you, Cassie.
Oh, that's me. Sorry. Well, as a member of Congress, the only way to get things done is to reach across the aisle, especially when things are going to benefit the District 28. So I look forward to working with my partners, whether Republicans and Democrats, working on legislation, working on letters of support for the betterment of the district. Also, working with members, it improves the families. Bipartisan support is the best way for leaders and the laws to be effective. So I will work hand in hand, if it's going to benefit the district, whether it be on infrastructure, whether it be on broadband development, creating more jobs, I promised to work hand in hand, reach across the aisle and get things done for District 28.
Okay, Sandra?
So it is important that we do work with other members of Congress, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, doesn't really matter, but we got to make sure that we're not compromising our values. We can't allow compromise or working together to turn into stuffing bills or doing political favors for one another. We have to get in there. We've got to start stripping things down, but we can't just keep allowing the same status quo. And that's exactly why people don't work together, because they're too busy trying to make sure we're stuffing it full of political favors or political activism or things along those lines. We're not being sent to Congress to play along, to get along. We're being sent to Congress to get a job done. And the problem is that when we allow this cycle of insanity to continue, where it's, well, you scratch my back and I'll scratch your back, then that's why nothing gets done, or things do get done, but the American people are the ones that are suffering. When bills get stuffed with a whole bunch of nonsense, and then we tack on federal employees' pay just to make sure that it gets passed, that's not being bipartisan, and it's not getting a job done. It's making the American people and the taxpayers suffer at the hands of greedy politicians and the guys that work with them. Sorry, I lost the last word there. I apologize.
It's okay. Well, you can regroup because you're going to answer the next question. Because we live on the border, we are more aware of what is really happening here versus how sometimes we're portrayed in the media. And as a past mayor, I can really say that's absolutely true. Depends on which network you do. I switched stations to see which was true or not. But in your opinion, what is the state of our US-Mexican border? Are we safe? Are we not safe? And what can we do about it?
It's actually one of my favorite questions, so thank you for asking it. I tell people all the time, I absolutely adore my neighbors. I adore the communities that I live and work in. I've never not felt safe from anybody in the United States of America. However, I'm very cautious. We know that the cartel is acting in a way that we've not seen them act since the last time a Democrat was in office, which was Obama. They're getting more violent on the US-Mexico border. They're sending in SWAT-style teams to come in and neutralize their enemies here in the United States. And we are seeing where they're causing more havoc here in America. We've seen it in the bigger cities, of course, but now we're seeing it here along our counties. Zapata County, for example, had somebody who was actually dismembered because it was a cartel hit piece. And we know for a fact that the cartel went back into Mexico after they killed this young man. So we are starting to see a rise in violence here on the US-Mexico border. And it is important that we know who our neighbors and our friends are and check in on them often.
Cassie?
So this, for my 17 years in public service and working closely with mayors along the southern border, I can say it's one of the safest communities, being on the border is one of the safest. And I've had the privilege to bring, during my past time working for a senator, bringing down members of Congress and showing how beautiful the Rio Grande Valley is, how beautiful Laredo is, how beautiful El Paso is. You look at the crime rates, the stats are very low. We are not at Austin, we're not at Chicago, we're not in New York City where we have shootings every day. So as far as being safe on the US-Mexico border, yes. Now, the issues that we do have are the influx that we have with the border crisis, that's playing out right now. It's the unknowns that are coming in. I call them the bad guys that are coming across the border that we don't know, the gotaways, and the known terrorists that Border Patrol may not be apprehending. And so those situations, and I've always said this, in order to have a strong economy, we need to have a secure border. We have we work alongside with our Mexican partners. We've got manufacturing companies. We want those that are either working in the United States and going back home to feel safe. And also those that are living here that working along the southern border. I'm talking about our law enforcement officials, DPS troopers there. They're doing a tremendous job to secure our southern border. But again, it goes back we're applying a lot of resources to the southern border, and I know the optics sometimes looks like we're militarizing our southern border. And so to answer the question, I do feel safe. It is safe, but in order to be safer and to have a stronger economy, we need to secure our southern border.
Okay. And speaking of that, Cassie's first question, do you favor or oppose a wall, and why? And then I guess the second question is, how do you balance the right of property owners in national security where federal government's taking their land?
Yeah. So in response to whether I support a border wall system, I do, we need to work with Border Patrol and ask them, where is it that it'd be best to put this wall? Do you prefer technology? Should we support more funding for aerostats that help with 8-mile radius? I know sometimes that's a little bit, it's very expensive to put an aerostat up, but the 7 aerostats that we do have along the southern border have been helpful. So we need to look at all resources, whether it's closing the gaps in some of the border wall systems that we put up, looking at technology, clearing out all weather roads, looking at light sensors, cameras. I mentioned earlier, putting aerostats out there, anything that will help Border Patrol agents do their job. I think we need to support them. I think the administration, I think members of Congress, and being a next Congresswoman, I want to work with our agencies to see whether it be Department of Homeland Security and say, okay, this is where we need to put our border wall system. This is where it's going to, help deter the bad elements that are coming across our southern border. And what was the other question, Mayor Darling?
Well, we'll say that for another question.
Okay,
That was kind of, so we'll say that for a second one. So Sandra, do you favor or oppose the border wall, and why?
So I believe that the wall needs to go where the agents say that it needs to go. It's a message that I've had for the last 3 years. We have a natural resource, which is called the river. And if we actually pour into it the way that it needs to be poured into, clearing out the non-native plants that are soaking up over 30 gallons of water a day, that's going to go a long way. Let's throw a couple alligators in there. They're native to South Texas also. So let's get them back in the Rio Grande. The wall is a divisive conversation. And I think that what happened is that it gets lost in the shuffle. We cannot allow the butterflies and things along those lines to be more important than actual human beings that are being sex trafficked in this human rape slave trade. So we've got to put that emphasis on there. Dealing with the landowners want secure borders because it is their land. They do not want the federal government to come in and take over their property. So what we as the federal government need to do is work with the landowners and then allow what they want on their properties, and then we go from there. We don't believe in taking people's property. That's not American.
Yeah, I never knew why we put a wall up on the levee system a mile away from the river, but they did. That's another question. Okay, so I forgot what I was going to ask in a follow-up. Oh yeah, so the question is, Cassie, in fairness to you, it's how do you balance the landowners' rights, the federal government protecting them?
Right. So we talk about, and working with landowners for the past 13 years, that's always been a question as far as eminent domain, talking to, you've got some landowners that say, I want to secure the border. You got some landowners that say, I don't want any border wall infrastructure, but I will put an aerostat on my property. So that's always been a tricky situation. Also talking to landowners that have had their fences torn down, and they're still waiting for reimbursement. Now, it's a different situation if there's a chase going on and Border Patrol knocks over their fence or anything like that. Obviously, the government will come in and pay for that. But then right now we're dealing with a ton of landowners that are dealing with property damage, whether it be torn down fences. And so I know we need to look at all avenues to see how we can best protect our landowners who are dealing with either, migrants crossing, cartels going through some through their property, or smugglers, and destroying property of our landowners. So again, this has been a conversation we've had for many, many years on what is the best solution to do to secure those that are the property owners that are either on the border or through the interior. And seeing what the best way to help them, be able to maintain their property.
And Sandra, you already stated your opinion. Do you have anything else to add on that?
I was going to ask if I could get another minute to expand on mine also, since I followed the rules of engagement. But, it's important that when we're looking at, like I said, and I believe my opening statement, we can't just make blanket statements about more boots on the ground and more equipment. That's not what our agents are asking for. Our agents are asking for the union to actually do their job and quit getting rid of senior agents. We've got to make sure that we're not just putting in 5,000 brand new agents that don't know the terrain and don't know what's happening. We have to make sure that these seasoned agents are here because they know what to expect. They know what's going on, and they're the experts on the matter. They're even the experts on dealing with these ranch owners. We've run into situations where agents are allowed, some agents are allowed on and other agents aren't, because they have a rapport with the landowners. So when we start looking at eminent domain, and when we start looking about what our agents actually need and how we can secure our border, we can't just leave it up to the talking heads that spend all of their time in Washington, D.C. We actually have to spend our time with the agents that are dealing with us every single day.
Okay, not exactly landowner rights, but we'll let that one go. Okay, let's talk, it's kind of related to, I'm going to talk a little bit about economic development on the border, but related to a little bit, it's our relationship with Mexico. And it's, it all depends who's the Mexican president, who's the American president. When you go to Washington, how do you talk to people about how close the relationship we have with Mexico and how can it be improved?
That one goes to me first.
That's Sandy
right?
first. Yes,
Okay.
Sorry.
So it's pretty simple. I tell people all the time, imagine having if you're in Dallas, imagine telling somebody that you can't go and talk to somebody in Grand Prairie, even though you share business there. It doesn't make sense. And it's the same relationship that we here in the US-Mexico border have with our friends across Nuevo Laredo and Miguel Alemán, and all up and down the Rio Grande. It's just, that's the reality of life. Some people have doctors over there. Some people have, counselors, or some people go to school on both sides of the river. So we have a very important working relationship with our neighbors, and that's why we call them sister cities. Here in Laredo, it's Nuevo Laredo. So we build on this thing, and what we're doing is we're failing our sister cities by not putting an emphasis on the border and explaining that AMLO is only a product of who's put him there. Just like we have the upper hand where we get to fight to be a better product of who we have in office. So that's the joy of being America. So we just need to be able to make sure that we're putting that emphasis that we have to have a good relationship with Mexico. We do have a good relationship with Mexico, and we cannot cloud the two.
Okay, Cassie?
Can you repeat the question again? Was a question about how do we?
Yeah, our relation. How do we? What's our relationship with Mexico? How do you explain that in Washington, and how can we improve it?
So that's a great question. So as I tell everybody, Mexico is our #1 trading partner. And so if I could talk about the USMCA,
We're going to talk about that next question.
Oh, next question. Okay. So I tell everybody, we need, like I've said before, and I've said it again, talking, in order to have a strong economy, we need to have a strong border. So it's important that our leaders, as a member of Congress, that we're constantly communicating with our governors on the southern border in Mexico, making sure we build those relationships, and talk about how we can secure and provide prosperity for the residents, the people that live in Mexico, and also the folks that live on our side, whether it be Laredo or the RGV, and throughout Texas. It's beautiful. People don't understand the dynamic and how close we are. many of us have family members in Mexico, and obviously due to the shutdown through the non-essential travel ban, many people didn't get to see their grandparents or get to see their cousins for over 19 months. And so, but I want to say that we need to continue that relationship, continue talking. I think we need to do a better job of visiting each other and making sure that we continue to work. We have ports of entry that we need to work on, whether it be infrastructure, but when we talk to people about what is so unique about the U.S.-Mexico border, it's the relations and how close we are. And I know Sandra talked about sister cities, so it's great to be able to bring them over, do signing ceremonies, and talk about our beautiful and rich culture that we share together.
Great. Okay, now we're going to talk about USMCA. We know on the border how important NAFTA was. It was a game changer for the border when it was implemented some 25 years ago. And USMCA seems to improve it, both in labor issues and otherwise. Do you support USMCA, and why or why not? And let's see, that is Cassie's question. 1 second, yeah. Your question, you support the USMCA, and why or why not?
Yes, I jumped ahead on that one earlier. So yes, I do support the USMCA. Trade is extremely important. And that's one of the things, I talk to people that don't understand, if they've never been to the RGV, Laredo, El Paso area, we talk about how trade is important. And specifically District 28 as a World Trade Bridge, and Laredo Port of Entry is a #1 nationwide leader in truck arrivals. 39 million American jobs depend on trade. The greatest access to trade means greater economic opportunities in the United States. This especially is true for small businesses, which make up about 98% of all U.S. exporters. The freedom to buy and sell goods around the world increases prosperity in the United States and gives Americans, greater access to technological innovation and enhancing their quality of life. Now, Texas knows firsthand the importance of international trade, especially with Mexico and Canada. That's because no state in the union has more invested in trade with our neighbors in the Lone Star State. As a fierce competitor on the international stage, Texas is home to more than 2.2 million jobs dependent on trade, which is with the USMCA agreement, it's anticipated to create over 180,000 more jobs and provide a 70 billion boost to the US GDP. So this deal is a win-win for Texas farmers, ranchers, businesses, manufacturers, and it will ensure greater economic opportunity for every American.
Okay. Sandra?
I'm honored to say that I'm actually personal friends with some of the drafters of the USMCA agreement and originally NAFTA. And, it's important that we understand what these bills are for, what these agreements were about. And it was about easing the trade and kind of cutting out some of the red tape. But we can't keep putting all the emphasis on just one trade bridge, the World Trade Bridge. We need to understand that these same drafters are trying and fighting to get another bridge, but current legislators do not want another bridge because they're afraid it's going to take away their crown and glory. So if we want to maintain being the #1 trade port, we have to put in more bridges, and we've got to put in more railways. This is what kept District 28 essentially still alive and active during the COVID shutdowns of everything, and why we didn't see the same decreases in stuff that the rest of the United States saw. With the trade shortages that are happening right now, the consumer shortages that are happening right now, we're seeing it all over the place. Long lines at the World Trade Bridge, for example, and other ports of entry are what is making this even worse. So this is not just a short-term solution. This is something that we've got to look into the future. We know what the trade routes are starting to look like. We know what the new roadway systems are starting to look like. So we've got to start being on the front line of putting this new infrastructure in right now if we expect the USMCA trade agreement to continue to be a blessing to the United States.
Okay, I'm going to do a follow-up question. I'll give it to Cassie first. The way that bridges are constructed in the United States is mainly municipalities do it, some private ownership, no federal participation in building bridges. They don't build them, they rent them for Customs Border Protection purposes. But the process is 15 to 20 years to get through the process with the federal government. What would you do if you're a congressman to move that along?
Gosh, I would do a congressional bypass, so that way we don't have to
Iron
wait.
First.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, there's, the anything, when you want to do a new bridge, we've been working on bridge projects. It takes years and years and years. You have to work through the bureaucrat, red tape. You got to do environmental studies. It's a ton. It takes years and years and years. And we say, why can't we just cut through the red tape? You have to work with GSA. We've seen it. And I know there's other communities that want to build bridges, but it's very difficult to go through the process. We've seen it firsthand, with Anza Dua's bridge in Mission. So as a member of Congress, I'd like to see how we can, bypass 15, 20 years, get that funding and help secure, whether it be expanding. I mean, sometimes it could take 3 years to get a fan to one of the bridge lanes, and that's why it's so important that we talk about the public-private partnerships that we have that invest, whether it's providing more overtime for port officers at the port of entry. And right now, due to longer lanes that we're seeing, it's because we're having to shift those port officers out to help Border Patrol process right now. And so that's squeezing, and we're seeing longer wait times right now. But to answer your question, I want to work to see how we can alleviate, bypass, make it easier process to help, whether it is to expand our ports of entry.
Okay, Sandra, if you're a congresswoman, what would you do?
So, one of the things that President Trump did in 2019, I believe it may have been 2020, was he actually signed an order, I believe, that allowed this process to get sped up. So instead of it taking 20 years, it was only going to take 10. It takes 10 years to get a presidential medal's not the right word, but to be able to put the bridge permit to put the bridges in. And so to assume that the men and women who've been fighting and doing these projects for 40 to 50 years haven't taken all of that into consideration, I think is insulting to those in the trade. These people know what's going to happen. These are public-private partnerships. They just need the federal government to quit playing red tape games. So we're allowing essentially the deconstruction of these bridges to happen because we're too busy with the bureaucrat games in Washington, D.C. and even in Austin. These are partnerships, but these are also federal problems. This is what Congress is supposed to be spending their time on, is making sure that these international and interstate traveled roads are being taken care of and provided for. And if we believe in the USMCA trade agreement, if we believe in the expansion of bridges, then we have to make this a priority and not say we've got to just wait and see what's going to happen. The paperwork's already been done. Let's now get it started. Let's break the ground.
Well, it's good to see that you two ladies are giving the CBP officers some love too. I feel like they're left out of the discussions. On the USMCA and trade, we're seeing a lot of activity or interest, at least with Chinese companies moving into Mexico. How do you feel about that? And how would you adjust that concerning the relationship between the United States and China as in Congress? Sandra goes first.
Okay, so I think that it's great that they're moving into Mexico. That's going to employ Mexican workers, and I think that that's very important. The reason that one of the reasons that Laredo became the #1 trade port in the United States is because President Trump put tariffs on China that sent the work into Mexico. So what's going to happen is that's going to allow the Mexican citizens to actually have places to actually have real work instead of having to rely on the cartel to get a paycheck to be able to provide for their family. That's one of the things that did make AMLO hold his feet to the fire, was putting the trade routes through Mexico. It made them have to keep that up because essentially what Trump did was he kind of helped make Mexico great again. One of the problems that we have, and one of the reasons that we keep seeing this influx of illegal workers in the United States of America, is because we're not allowing our trade to work around the country. USMCA trade agreement brought this in. We absolutely must bring manufacturing jobs to our district, and it's one of the things that I talk a lot about. But I have no problem with China moving factories into Mexico. I do have a problem with them being cartel-ran factories, and that's something that we have to put an emphasis on, because we are seeing where the Chinese cartel are buying up land here in the United States of America, specifically throughout our district and 23, and they're setting up cartel-owned shops and businesses through here to help fund their illegal activities, and we have to put an end to that.
Okay, Cassie.
What was it? Can you rephrase the question again? I'm sorry.
USMCA, as part of the trade agreements, we're seeing Chinese companies move into Mexico, and it's interested in considering our relationship with the Chinese. How would you, as a member of Congress, react to that.
Okay, so to answer your question, and so I think it's important to see that other companies like Chinese companies are coming in, but we also need to be aware too of what companies are coming in into Mexico. Is, you know, we have obviously a long-standing relationship with our folks, and we have a lot of companies that have been moving Reynosa into Matamoros and in Nuevo León and Laredo as well. And so I think we need to build that relationship and to make sure that we talk about trade deals, that it's a fair deal. We need to just broaden that you know, if it's creating more jobs, I think we need to expand on that and make sure we work hand in hand with with the president of Mexico. And the same goes for the Biden administration. So as a member of Congress, I want to ensure that we are creating more jobs, whether it be on the Mexican side or whether it be on our side, but I want to make sure there are fair trade, fair deals that are taking place. So, you know, I just want to make sure that it's great to see companies are coming in. I know we've been weary about Chinese companies that are buying land near the Del Rio area to build a Chinese, we're talking about wind farms. And so we need to be very skeptical about that too, but also be conscience minded about what companies that we are going to be working with in Mexico.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to the Chinese.
All right. And since that was a twofold question, you're up next, Kathy. Kathy, gun control. I want to talk about gun control. There's a lot of, every day reading the paper about people shooting, et cetera, all that. So do you support universal background checks for gun purchases? Why or why not?
Yeah, so I do, you know, we're talking about the Second Amendment. We talk, you know, obviously we've seen a lot of shootings happen within our schools districts, and we've seen, you know, cops get shot at. And so, you know, we talk about the Second Amendment, you know, when I tell people about gun checks and you know, Second Amendment right is not just about hunting, you know, it's not about target shooting. You know, the Second Amendment is about the fundamental God-given right and every one of us has to defend our lives. So to defend our homes and to defend our children, to defend our family. And so I believe that American citizens have the right to own, carry, and use guns. But I also do believe that there should be checks, you know, to make sure, because there are a lot of folks that go through the system, that get a background check, yet are still able to access a gun and hurt, you know, innocent lives. So I do think that there need to be universal background checks. And a lot of times it's the bad folks that are getting their hands on guns, you know, and going out there and doing harm to others. Okay.
Sandra.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to security of a free state, the right of the people and to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's very clear that nowhere in there is universal background checks going to protect anybody. The people who are purchasing firearms are not walking into a Gander Mountain or a Bass Pro Shop to try and buy a firearm. They're getting it in a back row alley. We're leaving millions and trillions of dollars worth of equipment in foreign lands with their intent of nothing but to hurt us. So no, I do not support universal background checks because that is not what our Constitution states. Do we want bad guys with guns? Absolutely not. But when was the last time that you saw a bad guy pay attention to the laws that was written on the wall? When I see a sign that says 30-06, 30-7, that means I can't carry the firearm that I have a license to carry into a place. That means that I've gone through the training and I know what the law is. Bad guys don't care. They're going to carry a gun in there. That's why gun zones don't work either, or no gun zones work either, because they still carry guns, and that's where most of these tragedies happen, and is in a gun-free zone. Universal background checks do not protect the American people. If anything, they hurt the American people. Because what about a woman who gets a restraining order put on her because of a man beating the crud out of her every single day? Now she can't get a firearm, and she's the one that ends up dead. I do not support universal background checks because that is a red flag law.
Okay. So Sandra, the next question is, do you feel that gun control is a federal or state issue, or should be left to the states?
I think it's pretty clear in the Constitution that it's a federal issue. Gun control means using two hands. I'm never going to back down from that statement or that feeling on it, because we are a free land, we're a free people, and we should not be regulating that's something that's cut and dry in the United States Constitution, as I believe some states have made it in their constitutions also. That goes back to the same question with marijuana laws. Some states are making it legal, but it's still federally illegal. So what law do we follow there? The Constitution is clear, shall not be infringed. And I think that we need to make sure that the states understand that. And we need to make sure that we, the people, are exercising our rights.
Cassie,
So I will agree to that too. You know, as we talk about this Second Amendment, it says shall not be infringed. It means exactly that, shall not be infringed. And I believe that American citizens have the right to own, carry, and use the guns. Among those undeniable rights is the right to bear arms, as spelled out in the Second Amendment. I think it's most important here that we allow the rights of law-abiding citizens to be protected. We need to make sure we are working really hard to bring forth laws that increase penalties for violent offenders.
okay. Let's talk about a less controversial subject, COVID-19. Just when we thought we're starting to see the light, it's a new variant coming out, et cetera, and all that's going on. And so, you know, there's different positions. I think it's polarized the country. But I'm asking, what is your position on mask and vaccination? Should they be required under any circumstances? Number one. And number two, should that be a local, state, or federal policy? And that's who went first. Cassie, you're first this time.
So, so I do not support vaccine mandates, you know, and I do not support any more lockdowns. So if we're going to talk about lockdown, let's lock down the southern border. So, well, I'll talk about why I support I'll tell you this. So Americans have the right to exercise, you know, personal choice, you know, when it comes to their health. You know, getting the vaccine is a decision that needs to be made with consultation with one's doctor. And, you know, I received the COVID-19 vaccine because it was the right decision for me after consulting with my doctor, and it should not be forced on Americans by the government. A vaccine passport, in my opinion, is discriminatory against people for whatever reason choose not to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Americans shouldn't be discriminated against because of their vaccine status. Americans have a well-established right to privacy, and that any mandated vaccine passport would destroy. We should be encouraging individuals to receive the vaccine through increased, you know, patient protections, not mandating it. The vaccine mandates are illegal, they're unconstitutional, and it's just a grotesque abuse of power. We see now, you know, with children, you know, the issue now with kids in school wearing masks, not wearing masks. I think we're dealing with, it goes into a whole other issue with mental, kids are dealing with mental issues as far as, you know, with the lockdown. But I do think that it's, you know, we talk about whether it's a local, state, or federal issue. I think we need to stay out of it. And I think we just, you know, we need to do what's best for District 28. And I am not for any vaccine, no mandates or lockdowns, any more lockdowns.
Okay, Cassie? Oh, I'm sorry, Sandra, sorry.
So I've been very outspoken on this. I actually had the honor of traveling the state to do Texas open certain city rallies. We did one here in Laredo. I did some in Austin, Dallas, up in Tyler. It's an important conversation. I'm completely against the vaccine. I'm certainly against it being mandated and forced. We're seeing far too many people who are not only just getting side effects, and including loss of pregnancies. We're seeing men who are having, especially men having heart and testicular issues. We're seeing where young boys and young women are having issues that they've never even seen before. We see where people are having deformities. They're having longer hospital stays. We see even the DoD is covering up the actual numbers of loss of life because of the vaccine. So we have to actually take a look at where these numbers are really coming from. And in fact, that was actually in a Senate hearing that was earlier last week. So we know that the vaccine is not necessarily effective at all. And we're actually seeing where people who are getting the vaccine are having stronger reactions from it for people around them because of the proteins that it emits. I'm definitely against it. I will stand for a mandate. whether it's state, federal, or local. I saw how it destroyed our communities, and I see how it's destroying people's lives and their personal and workplace lives. And it's disgusting, and it's abuse of power, and it's not what we the people stand for.
You know, I grew up with the polio epidemic, and they have polio vaccine. Would you apply the same thing to polio vaccines being mandated by the government, which it is presently?
Was that a blanket question, or was that to me specifically?
A follow-up question to you. And I'm going to
So
ask you.
my kids have gotten all of those types of vaccines, but those are tested vaccines that were put out that, you know, granted, it wasn't 50 years ago for you, no offense, but, you know, it was certainly tried and true before it got into the hands of the mass population. And it was never forced on anybody. It is strongly suggested, but I tell people all the time, you can actually have a religious exemption waiver or a medical waiver and still go to public schools without having those vaccines. My kids are fully vaccinated from all childhood diseases minus the PPV one. But I'm perfectly okay with vaccines. This one was not properly tested. We saw during the testing where lab animals were dying, we saw where people were dying instantly, and we saw where women who were pregnant and not just in their first trimester were losing their babies within 72 hours of having that vaccine. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not against vaccines, but I am against the forced push out of this vaccine. And I strongly disagreed with every single elected official when they said, you must get this. It has not been tested long enough. I know too many people in the medical community, doctors, nurses, EMTs, paramedics, you fill in the blank, and most of them strongly agree with that statement. It has not been tested out long enough. Yes, there are some that are going along with the Fauci information on this, but more than not, because their voices are getting silenced, just like the frontline doctors, this has not been properly done, and people are raising red flags about that.
Okay, Cassie?
So I'm not anti-vaccine. And so I know I received all the shots, but the same as Sandra has mentioned here, there hasn't been enough tests. Obviously there were record, they made the vaccine within months under the Trump administration. And so that was great to see them together to come up with the vaccine. But on a personal level, I did receive the COVID-19 vaccine, and I did get some underlying conditions from it. So my doctor, after further consulting my doctor, she advised me not to get the booster shot. So I got the 1 and 2, but not the booster. And I'm dealing with some underlying conditions from, again, they don't know if it's from the vaccine or is it from when I got COVID back in November 2020. So I think after we do more studies, then, I know that we all got shots to go into kindergarten, to go into school. So I think as we give it more time, do more research, and we can see, if this is something that, it's going to be required for students to enter school, just like we got, the polio vaccines and all the other vaccines that we needed to get necessary to, to sign up to get into school. So
Similar to the flu shot.
similar to a flu shot.
Okay, federal earmarks. That's a favorite subject for Congress people. Earmarks, which appropriate funds for specific projects in members' districts, were very popular until they were done away with in 2011. But some argue that the moratorium on the earmarks didn't really do away with them, but only made them less transparent. Would you support federal earmarks and being more transparent? Why or why not? See who started last time. Cassie, you start now.
Okay, so do I support earmarks? What I'm interested in is doing what's best for District 28. My top priority, whether there's earmarks or no earmarks, is fighting, for more creation of more jobs, make sure there's infrastructure, that we provide jobs for everyone that needs work in District 28. Again, it's just improving the lives of the families of District 28. So again, whether it's earmarks or no earmarks, I want to be able to say we can support projects that are going to benefit the district.
Okay, and Sandra.
Well, I think it's kind of clear where some of the earmarks don't benefit our district. And we see that with our current congressman. We see where he's gone in and he's trying to shove money into his special interest groups, like the airports and things along those lines, where it's not truly benefiting everybody except for his biggest donors. So earmarks can work, but they only if it's for the greater good and not just for one donor, for instance, as is with the incumbent. One of the things that we're seeing, especially since he's a senior member of the Appropriations Committee, specifically with the CARES Act, he sent trillions of dollars out around the country and then said, I didn't know how that was going to get spent. So when we're sending members of Congress who are the senior members of the Appropriations Committee up there, and then they say, I don't know how I'm spending trillions of dollars, I think that that's something that we need to take a deeper look at. So earmarks are kind of I think they're almost a thing of the past. When we start stripping down and getting back to the nuts and bolts of what the Constitution is about, what Congress's actual job is about, I think we'll be able to have a clearer path to spend money as opposed to just getting in there and doing what's best for our favorite donors.
Right. I think there's one last question. We're going to talk about the internet. There's some people that think the internet is access to a high-speed internet is as important as water and sewer was. And I must explain that. For years, rural areas didn't have water, so we created water supply corporations, which were funded by the federal government. And same thing with electricity, with electric co-ops who were funded to reach those out. Would you be in favor of the federal government being involved in a game plan and funding for high-speed internet to rural areas? And that's who went first last time? Cassie, you're first. No,
Okay.
Sandra's first. I'm sorry, Sandra's first.
No worries. So we actually saw some of that even within this last 12 months with with the current congressman. So he sent money over to Zapata, for example, for internet because they're a rural community. I don't know if you've driven through Zapata here recently, but you still lose signal. So I don't know where that money went, but it hasn't gotten into it to the system as well as he thinks that it has. But in the same breath, these are the same people who are screaming and crying for more water. They don't have enough water in their lake. That's the only source of water for all of the counties along the border is the Rio Grande. It's never been the federal government's job to make sure that we had the internet. Is the internet incredibly important and useful? Absolutely it is, but I don't believe that it should be a right by any stretch of the imagination. But when we have counties that are screaming out for water and we can't take care of a true basic need, then no, I think the federal government needs to stay out of getting rural places internet. When we send care packages or we send money over to foreign countries, we make sure that it goes to getting them clean water sources and that they get sustainable ways of food. We don't put internet as a priority because we know that food and water are the actual priorities, not the internet.
Okay, Cassie.
What was the question about broadband, right? Do we?
Yeah, there's a federal government responsibility to extend broadband to rural and underserved areas.
So I think we need to look at, again, public-private partnerships, looking at other entities that I think they might do it best. You know, we talk about broadband development. There is a digital divide, and this affects rural communities, and I've seen that firsthand. And especially we saw this during the COVID pandemic with remote schooling. That was an issue for parents. You know, many children did not have access to broadband, and so you know this is important. We talk about infrastructure. Broadband is part of infrastructure, and we need to make sure that every community, whether it's 5G or making sure that every community through District 28 has access to broadband. We need to ensure, you know, because broadband, you know, we talk about rural healthcare, we talk about the increased ability to use electronic records, wireless medical devices. You know, also we have we talk about first responders. Broadband is important. I think we need to work with public-private partnerships. I think if there's any federal resources and monies that are coming down to our Council of Governments, we need to make sure that those monies are being used and to provide that infrastructure to our rural communities. Broadband, again, I'll say it over and again, it's a digital divide. We need to make sure that our communities are up to date and have access. Okay, so I think Nedra's on the screen, so we have to wrap it up. We're going to give you each a minute, right? Is that the close? Okay, and let's see. I guess we started with Cassie. So Sandra, if you want to wrap it up, you have a minute to do so.
So thank you so much for putting this forum on. I appreciate the time that it took everybody. It's important that you get to know your candidates. And I've been here, I've been fighting for you on a congressional scale, if you will, for the last 3 years, all the way throughout the district and then some. When I signed up to run for Congress in 2019, I said that I was going to be our ambassador, and that's exactly what I've done. I've been making sure that we bring these issues to the front line. I've not shied away from the topics that are untouchable or nobody wants to talk about. Smoke and mirrors don't work around here. We have to hit the facts, and we have to hit them hard. We've got to hold Congress and the Senate accountable. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to put in the structure that is necessary. And we already have that structure. It's the United States Constitution. This is what our blueprint should be for running our country. And yet this is what we're neglecting. We're allowing bureaucrats, we're allowing all of these additional things like the school boards on a federal level, the energy sources on a federal level. None of that is constitutional. We're spending tons and tons and tons of money, billions of dollars annually for things that are not helping our district. We need to start putting things back in the hands of Texans. And that's exactly what I will do when I get to Washington, D.C. This isn't about sending a Republican to Washington, D.C. This is about sending the right Republican to Washington, D.C., who is not going to sit here and play games and who's going to make sure that Nancy Pelosi, AOC, and her merry band of socialists stay out of our country and stay out of our state. My name is Sandra Whitten. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Cassie?
Yeah, so again, thank you so much for the opportunity, RG Doodle, and for the people, the viewers, the voters that are going to be making an important decision on who to elect as their new congressman or congresswoman, and looking at congresswoman here. To close it up in my remarks here, I just want to say, the American dream is my reality. And this is the reason why I'm running for Congress. People across the district are looking for a new voice in Washington, one that inspires hope and that is focused on creating jobs, protecting innocent life, and securing our border and upholding our constitutional rights. I pledge to work tirelessly every single day to make the American dream a possibility for every citizen and family that calls District 28 home. I have had the privilege of 17 years of public service working for my first job at City of McAllen, workforce development. I've worked for the Department of Agriculture doing rural economic development for 5 years. I've been the Deputy State Director for Senator Ted Cruz for 8 years, and I was a presidential appointee for President Donald J. Trump to sit on his White House Hispanic Prosperity Commission, focusing on school choice and opportunity zones. If elected, I will make history as the first female Hispanic conservative for District 28. And so I look forward to working hard and gaining your vote and for your support. Again, I'm Cassie Garcia, and I'm running for Congress for District 28. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, we want to thank you. We realize it's very difficult in 1 minute shots to try to put all that across, but I think you did an excellent job, so we appreciate it. I'm sure the voters will too. Thank you very much. Nedra?
Well, thank you, candidates. Thank you, Jim, our tech staff, and all of the FaceTime viewers out there who are listening and learning about these candidates who want to be your leader for U.S. Congressional District 22 or 28, excuse me. Futuro has been hosting a number of candidate forums, both Republican and Democrat. And we urge you to go to facebook.com or go to the League of Women Voters, vote 411, and learn more about these candidates. As American citizens and as people who care about our democracy, you, our viewers, our voters, have to be informed about the people who want to serve you. You need to be an informed voter. Find out what they stand for. They're not all the same. They have different ways of leading, different ideas, and different perspectives on how to solve problems. You need to be informed yourself and then hold them accountable. So educate yourself so that we keep our democracy strong. It's up to you and me and all of us to keep our democracy strong. So early voting is February 14th to 25th. Election day is March 1. And the Futuro message to you, as always, is be an informed voter. Exercise your duty, exercise your right, and exercise your privilege to vote to keep a strong Hidalgo County, a strong Starr County, a strong District 28, and a strong democracy. So thank you and good night.